Nice. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for sticking around if you've been here for a while. I want to just kind of let everyone know the purpose of today's event. Not only was it to bring such amazing, talented filmmakers together, it was to bring all of you together. For me, you know, when we opened Set Ready in Hamilton in November, it was a shock to me how many people came to that grand opening. And now, you know, seeing the amount of people that are here today, I want to thank you for coming, because ultimately, Set Ready was my goal to bring the film community together. And I think Hamilton and Toronto and those that have come from outside areas, you know, we're all in this same industry working towards the same goal. So it's amazing to see so many of you here to enjoy this. And for me, you know, with Set Ready, I feel very privileged that all of you came. So thank you. And if you've been here since this morning or this afternoon, thank you so much. And I want to take this opportunity to thank my team, because they've been working tirelessly for the last week in preparation for this event. So thank you to them. And I think without further ado, let's introduce our expert panel here. We're going to go from, we started this side last time. Let's start from this side. Introduce yourself, Brandon, and, you know, kind of how you got into the narrative world.
So my name is Brandon Canning. I feel like I have stumbled like ass backwards into every aspect of this industry that I've found myself in. And I think I owe everything that I've, got into the narrative world actually to Cristoph, who has brought me in as on his crew over the last number of years, first as like a second and then firsting and bringing me up along there. But yeah, I right now feel like I'm still pretty early in my narrative career and making that transition, and I kind of hope to maybe touch on that if anyone else is kind of in that space of making that transition into narrative as well.
Fantastic. And Cristoph, I mean, you've shot multiple things, and do you want to just kind of tell everyone some of the stuff that you've worked on recently and how you kind of got into the film world of narrative?
So I'm Cristoph. I'm a cinematographer, and I work in the film industry, like all of you. And you can catch some of the stuff I've made. I do a lot of narrative television series and movies. The most recent things I've worked on, there's a Netflix show called I Woke Up a Vampire, which is like a kids show, like preteens vampire show. It was a lot of fun to work on. And another one that I did was on CBC Gem right now is called Paris, Paris. And it's about a guy who finds a tunnel in his basement that leads from Paris, Ontario to Paris, France, and then later Paris, Texas. And it's a very magical, whimsical TV show. And yeah, that's what I do for a living.
My name is Marni VanDyk. I am a writer, director, not always both at the same time on every project. I got into this world through comedy. I came from live sketch comedy, and that sent me into television. And I've done a whole slew of things. And then that sent me to film. I went to the Film Center, the Canadian Film Center, for their Writers Lab. And so I wrote a feature that premiered at TIFF a couple years ago that's done pretty good for Canadian film and do a lot of television. So this past year I worked on a new show for Crave called Late Bloomer. And I just directed 6 episodes of a new Crave original called Made for TV with Bowman Martinez-Reed that is like a hybrid series. So it's like a combination follow doc comedy, and then we touch sports and news, and we send up reality dating formats, like all the different genres of television you can imagine. We shoot in the style of and send it up. So that was like a really interesting process working with the DP to figure out the visual style of that show. And I just had a dark comedy that premiered at TIFF in the last TIFF 23. Yeah. So that's what I do. And I'm trying to get into commercials because they're really great.
So for those of you that were here for our conversation about commercials, the choice to be a narrative is almost the opposite of what we talked about before. You're working and you're invested in something for a long period of time. It's not short, it's not turnover, you're not working on potentially multiple projects. You're really laser focused. I'm curious, did each of you decide that the narrative world was what you wanted to explore, and why long format as opposed to commercial?
I mean, I got into filmmaking. I've loved movies since I was a kid, and actually recently my dad told me that he wanted to be a filmmaker, but he grew up in a family where you had to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever to be successful, so he was never able to take that plunge. So my parents were really instrumental in like letting me do really stupid things and make mistakes. So from a young age, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, but when I started coming up in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, the advice out there was like, if you want to be a successful filmmaker, don't quit your day job because nobody makes money doing it. And I kind of decided to do it anyway. It was before digital had kind of taken off, and so it was very expensive to make movies. So you kind of had to do the traditional thing, which was like start as a camera assistant, and if you didn't go to film school, that is, and then work your way up. So I always knew I wanted to make movies, and to me, I look at commercials, and it's like we're using all the same tools in the toolkit, and we're still telling stories, and but at the end of the day, we're selling a product, and that's not why I became a filmmaker. So commercials to me feel a little bit soul-sucking, and no offense to everyone who does commercials there, but I feel very fortunate that I get to do narrative stuff, because to me, I think storytelling is a very interesting aspect of this art form. And I just watched Dune on Sunday, and it kind of reminded me, the second Dune, it reminded me of like how powerful storytelling can be, and that's why I got into filmmaking, was to be able to tell powerful stories. And the cool thing I like about my job as a cinematographer, I feel like people who look like me have told their stories over and over again. So I don't really feel like there's anything burning inside of me, that a story that I need to tell that the world needs to know. But as a cinematographer, I get to work with directors of all walks of life and help them bring their stories to life, and help them tell stories in a way that is using all the tools in the toolkit. And I feel like it's very fortunate to be in a position to be able to do that in the narrative space. So that's what I like about my job.
Brandon, and you said, you've worked on sets from being a second and a first, and how did you get into that role? I mean, obviously you guys had worked together, but how did you decide that you were going to go down the narrative route?
I feel like I get bored like pretty easily, and so I feel like the last however many years I've been doing this in this field, I've been like at an agency. I was like kind of running my own production company. I was like a shooter for production companies. I did weddings for a little bit, and I was working on film sets, and I was kind of hopping back and forth and kind of all over the place. And it wasn't until I feel like I just kind of found, every time I was on a project, on a narrative project, I was like, this is fantastic, this is great. Towards the end, you're getting a little sleepy, you're getting a little tired, it's over, you're like, thank God, it's finally done. And within like a couple weeks, I'm like, shit, why aren't I on set? Like, why aren't I back with my friends making movies? And I kind of had a bit of an epiphany. Like last year, I was shooting this short. It was no budget. It was literally just like, I was the DP, gaffer, cam op, I was everything. And we had a really fantastic team, and it was a really great script, and this kind of like queer coming of age story, and we were all very proud of what we were making. But it was like a long day, and I'm just like, I've been doing everything all day. I get in the car, I load up, I'm driving back to the studio, and I just say out loud, this is all I want to do. Like, this is all I want to do, is be telling stories and like working with people and creating something. Like, we get to create things. I've never been able to like paint, or I have like some sort of very specific dyspraxia with like my fingers, where like I can't draw what's in my head. But for some reason, when I get behind a camera, I can like see things, and I feel that it's been a great way for me to express that artistic thing that's inside, to grab on, like Cristoph said, to someone's vision of what they want to create in the world, collaborate together, and I don't know, that to me is the most exciting thing. Commercials are great. I love them. I also like making money. That is good too. They're great for that. But I think like the love that I have for this is like watching movies. Like, that's what I've always loved, and what I'm always going to do. If it's been a long day, I want to watch a movie. That's like my safe space, is going back to that.
So when you talk about vision, I mean, our vision starts with a writer, and that vision gets executed. I'm curious, how do you stay motivated through that long duration from, especially the writing to post-production of writing, a film?
There's always in our industry tension between art and commerce, in between this sort of the stories that we are trying to tell, because that's how we live in the world, and the stories that we're, hired to tell for a variety of different buyers. For me, I think David Sedaris, who's like a really great comedy, not film writer, he writes comedic memoirs, said, I don't know what people do who don't write, because I don't know how you process living in the world. So for me, ideas are easy. Ideas are the most exciting part of this. That's why we're in this business. There's so many things you could do with your life that are easier, that are more lucrative. There's like a thing that is in us when we need to tell stories that we must. And there's like nothing quite like it. So I think, practically speaking, having projects in various stages of development is key. Like right now, my most finished project is touring film festivals, and I'm trying to sell it into distribution, but I've got stuff in post-production, and I have things that I'm pitching this week and next week. I have ideas that I'm currently talking with the DP about shooting a teaser for, proof of concept, to start the pitching process. So you're always kind of developing things, building relationships with people, having conversations with people, reading novels, watching other people's work, because the seeds of things take years to grow. The film that I had, it was called Learn to Swim, that premiered at TIFF. The director is Tyrone Tommy. I wrote it. We met at the Film Center together. That idea, that kernel of that idea, came to me 10 years ago when I was working teaching creative writing actually in France, oddly enough, and it percolated for 10 years until Tyrone and I had a conversation one day, and then it became a thing. So everything is always in process. I think we get like this about wanting things to happen quickly. And what's true is that sometimes things do happen quickly, and some things take time. And I think that that's actually to the benefit of the quality of work sometimes, is to let things take the time they need to take, and to keep pushing and growing and starting new things. Of course, finishing things is very important, but always starting things that are in various stages of development.
I'm curious, for those that haven't done a feature or haven't done an episodic, like, how do you go from I make commercials or promo videos or shoot weddings, short films, music videos, how do you go to something that's like that next level, that length, 40 minutes, 90 minutes? How do you get there?
I can only speak from my own experience, and for me, it started a really long time ago, and it was a long, drawn-out process to go from wanting to make movies to actually getting to do it. And the first step was meeting and collaborating with people who had ideas for short films. And you have to you may be able to make one short film, and that director will go on to make a feature version of that, and then you'll go to the film festivals, and that'll launch your career. But that didn't happen for me. I probably made about a dozen to 15 short films with different people that were all really cool ideas that we were all really excited about, and all it took was for one of those projects to have a director who got recognized for their work, or working with a producer, and that leads to the next project. So I think you're looking for really interesting and unique short film ideas is a good first step. It's also, I find I still like doing short films, because as soon as you get to the level that we're all at, I'm sure everyone up here would be able to say, it's like you're doing way more in a day than you would want to do in like a music video or a short film or a commercial. Like a commercial, you're spending all day or 2 days or 3 days for like a 15-second thing. In the world of narrative, at least in Canada, it's probably like you're shooting, 8 to 10 pages a day. If you're lucky, maybe you're doing 5 or 6 pages a day. So you're moving at a really fast pace. You're doing like 5 or 6 scenes in a day. So you're not able to kind of give it the same devotion that you would if you're doing like a 3-minute short film and you're spending 3 or 4 days on it. Then you can really hone your craft on those kinds of things. So I think trying to collaborate with people who have cool ideas for short films is probably step one, and then making as many of those as you possibly can, and then hoping that one of those like turns into something. And again, that's kind of speaking as a cinematographer. If you're a director, it's probably a different approach, because you're the one coming up with those ideas.
Still relationships, though. Like you want to align with people you have a similar value system with. I don't have very much experience in commercials. I have a lot of experience doing the indie film thing and being very clever about how you write your scripts, doing a lot of the work before the day, because the second all of your gear is rented and you have a van, and it's like everything is so expensive, and so you don't want to be figuring things out on the day. You want to be really spending that work that is 100% unpaid labor with your cinematographer if you're a director, or with your director if you're a cinematographer, getting on the same page about references, about what you want it to look like, about what your shot plan is. If you don't have a lot of money, which you never will in short films, then how do we take a swing? How do we make this interesting? Get the best actors, and make sure you have gone through and you've read it out loud. Like, this seems, I come from theater world where, script is king, and sometimes in film and narrative, the script is like, oh, well, just wait. Like, do not do that. Really plan ahead of time. And then in terms of the jump from short to feature, practically speaking, there are funds in Canada, like the Telefilm Talent to Watch program is a program that is become very popular for first-time filmmakers. The challenge with that budget level is that sometimes, like, the success of the film is in overcoming that budget level, because it's enough money to make something, but it's not enough money to make something at the same time. So that program, though, has produced a lot of pretty incredible films for first-time filmmakers, and there's a lot of people who worked on shorts, like teams that worked on shorts that then went to the feature level. So the jump, I think sometimes there's a fallacy like, oh, a short story is just like a mini novel. It's not. Just like a short film is not a mini film. It's its own sort of medium. So that jump is actually incredibly significant and needs to be done at the right time once you have some good practice under you with your team and with storytelling in general in the short format. Yeah.
I'm in that space right now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in that space where I've found in the last year, like, a crew of people here in Hamilton through the Hamilton Actors Studio with Jess Clement and Rochelle Zalter and Maxi Dara, who are great writers and producers and directors and actors who are working with great actors and teams in the city. And we've, in the last 8 months, done 8 short films, and we're just like busting them out, not as like a machine as fast as we can, but we're trying to do as much good work as possible, so that we are all kind of growing and challenging and pushing every single time a new concept, a new genre, a new direction to take. And so I think if you can find those people, if you can find those people who you can collaborate with, who you can trust, who trust you, and who everyone knows, like, there might not be much or any money going on, exchanging hands between us, but like, we are all aiming towards like one kind of goal. No one's trying to get one over on anyone else. No one's trying to use anyone else. Everyone's trying to move forward together. Like, that is key. And finding those people can be tricky, but I think once you do, really kind of latching onto that and then just riding it.
So would you say that collectively you found a group of people in the narrative space that you continue to work with over and over again, or are you constantly changing up your crew? Marni?
I definitely love working with new people and bring new people into the fold all the time, in front and behind the camera. But I would say, I have a couple of actors I will write for till the end of time. My editor I feel extremely loyal to, and I would feel very scared if I didn't have him. Like, there's certain people that are always going to be, my first AD that I'm always going to call first. But over time, working on smaller projects here and there, you meet people, and then you're like, I want to work with you again. Or, and you sort of, because people book and then they're unavailable. So I would say it's like a balance between being loyal and trying to help support your people in various departments, and also being open to new collaborations and meeting new people who you are aligned with in terms of your tone, in terms of your shorthand, in terms of how you want to work and the kind of set you want to be on. That's important. I'm thinking from the perspective of a director, which is a very specific role in a set, but the same is for all departments. You want to make sure that if you're spending all of your life doing something, that you're doing it with people who are there to elevate you, and that reciprocity is there.
Cristoph, when you are working on a film and you're selecting your crew, what advice would you give to people that are like, I want to get more into narrative, but I don't know how to break into that space to just get myself on set?
Yeah, there's all kinds of entry-level positions, and it sounds really obvious. But when you get those positions, it's kind of like, the thing I notice is there's people who show up and they just do the job. There's people who show up and they don't quite do the job. And then there's people who go way above and beyond what's expected, and they're very observant. They're constantly looking around, like, what are other people doing? How can I contribute to that? Yes, I'm being paid to just do this one thing, but how can I also show that I have ambition and I want to, get to the next level? And I try and surround myself with people who do that. That's how I came up. I was a second AC and then a first AC, and people would notice that I was trying to go above and beyond what was expected of me, and then that would kind of, help push me to the next level. So getting acquainted with somebody, like, it's as simple as maybe reaching out to somebody that you follow on Instagram that you want to work with and saying, like, hey, if you have any projects coming up, I would work for free. I would work for whatever the base rate is. I just want to get my foot in the door. And you might have to do that a few times. You might have to do it a handful of times. Eventually, hopefully somebody will, like, I know personally I'm always looking for new crew members to help bring up, because the crews that I work with are always, moving on to the next thing. Like you said, they get booked on other projects. So you might not hear back from the person right away, but if you reach out to enough people enough times, and I always tell people, like, nag me, like, don't feel bad that you messaged me 3 months ago and maybe I didn't respond. Like, do it again, because it's when I'm crewing up for a project that I'll quickly glance through, like, oh, whoever heard from recently. And then I'll, give those people opportunities. And especially on film sets, if you're willing to kind of work for next to nothing, it's like there's always something there for you. And it gives you an education in terms of, like, how do film sets function and things that you don't necessarily learn in film school or by watching YouTube videos. You just kind of have to be there. Start with the lowest thing. And if you have ambitions of being something better, then show the people that you're working with what you're capable of, and use those opportunities to kind of show that what you're capable of. Yeah.
A mistake that I've seen people make so many times, which is really hard to see people make, is when you start and you get whatever role you can get, you're someone's assistant, you're a PA, instead of just doing a really, really good job at that, because people will notice if you're really, really good at that job, people will explain to the director how they're actually really a writer, how they actually really are a cinematographer. And so they're interfacing, they are on the set, on the day, but instead of just being so good at that thing that they were hired to do and building a relationship, they're uncomfortable with the fact they're not in the role they want to be in yet. And so the impression that they make is that they don't really actually want to be there and help for the project on the day. So and this has happened for sure for me, where I've had an associate producer come on or a PA come on, and they are just killing it. They understand the day, which is 90% of this work is just like having street sense, like smart, just being like, that clearly needs to move from there to there, I will move it. Like, it's very practical sometimes. And if I see somebody who is hustling and helpful and trying to help the day flow, and is also a pleasure to work with, 100%, when I have 3 seconds by the craft table, I'm like, what are you doing? What do you want? What's next? What's the plan? Because that was how the only way I moved up was that I worked hard and people noticed and asked me how they could help me, and then they did. And so that's what you do. You go down to the next tier, and you do that for them as well. So I would say, just be really, really good at the job that you were asked to do, even if you're not being paid your worth, because at the beginning you will not be paid your worth, and the relationships will actually open up the avenues that you're really looking for.
Show, don't tell. That's like the name of this business. Like show people what you're capable of. Don't tell them. That's filmmaking in general. But
I think that, like, being on set is like school if you want it to be school. And I think that I've learned so much and was able to kind of like fast track some of my career. Because I kind of started a bit late. I started after having kids. Like, my life is complicated and it's difficult to make it work in this industry. And so I've had to kind of make these adjustments to a typical career path. And it's been circuitous in some ways and it's been fast tracked in others. But like, I remember being the first that I was ever on. Cristoph was DPing this like horror movie that we were kind of shooting, and Nick was our first AC, and I was the second, and I had never been on set before. And I asked Nick every single question during camera prep. He told me exactly what to do with a clapperboard. He told me like and I just asked questions every single day. And Nick knew I wasn't gunning for his job. I didn't even think that was possible. I was just curious. I just wanted to learn. And then the next time, you know more, and you can make that jump to the next position. You can move forward along. People see that you're not only, like you said, like working hard in your position, but you're actually like inquisitive, and I think that that's kind of the like the nervous, insecure way to try and like move in your career is to like, I'm actually like a DP, actually, like that's who I am, like that's you should know that, everyone should know that, right? Like I'm actually really good in these things. But like the confident way, the smart way, the way that's kind of just, I don't know, feels maybe more natural and comes off more natural is to just ask questions. People want to talk about their work, especially if they're good at it and they're interesting. You can go to school while getting paid, you know.
We're nerds, man.
Yeah.
All right, let's open it up to the audience. What questions do you guys have about making narrative long-form content? We answered all of the questions. Wow, fantastic job, everyone.
Hey, we did it.
Yes.
What do you use to capture your ideas when you're out doing something, pencil and paper? How do you turn it into an asset?
Marni, you've written a few films now. How do you get all those ideas in your head out?
A combination of things. My notes app on my iPhone is chaotic. I keep boards, like I'll make vision boards for things that I don't know where they're going. I do the old school tack things on the wall, like the wall in the upper part of my house is like completely covered in notes. Sometimes when I read novels to like get my brain out, or memoir to get my brain out of this world, because you start to think of things it's so analytically that it's hard to sort of free yourself from the tyranny of that. So I will use a highlighter, I'll put Post-its and things, and I keep a notebook. It's just a combination of things. Like, if an idea is really good, it will stay with you, and just like let things stay and live and grow in you. And then I would say at some point, you have to sit down with that and turn it into something. You have to write a draft, and the first draft of everything is, excuse my language, shit, and I still struggle with that now to this day. And I've written several things that have been produced, and I still struggle with it coming out badly. So for the first draft. So it's got to come out badly at some point, make it come out badly, be so comfortable with how bad of a writer you are, if you're a writer, or if you're a director, if you're anything, and then it's in the rewriting. So then if you want to bring in a writer or bring in a story editor, I'm like, story editors are the secret weapon of our industry. They will save us all. Bringing people into that. So yeah. Just keep track of your ideas. Like they will exit your brain. Yeah.
It's a little bit different, but like for cinematographers, you probably already know about this, but there's a website called Shot Deck that I use a lot in prep, and it has basically every movie or TV show you can imagine. They have kind of like a visual like vision board of that whole movie. They with frames from the movie. They have like what camera was used, what lenses were used, what type of shot it is, and I use that a ton in prep, especially when you're working with your director or your gaffer or your key grip to kind of bring more people on board with the look and feel you want of the movie. The thing that I do with that is I load up on that in prep, and then once we start shooting, I try to not look at it anymore, because now I just want to use like the mush in my brain of like my memory of that, but then put my own spin on it. But yeah, Shot Deck is like a essential tool. It's created by another cinematographer too, so it's kind of catered to what we do. It's
so good, and it's very professional level. So, and there's a cost associated with Shot Deck. So I would say, if for a more entry level, like there's Film Grab, which is not as comprehensive as Shot Deck, but does have some framing and some visual of some beautiful stuff, and then even Pinterest. Like Pinterest is pretty can be pretty, I would say, white skewing in terms of the types of like stuff that's on it, which can be hard if you're looking for references of people and faces. But in terms of just some visual imagery, it's also useful in terms of an archive of visual inspiration on something.
Awesome.
Free.
Question, yeah.
I think prep is so much more important on long format, because from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, whether it's 15 days or 40 days or 70 days, you can kind of lose sight of, like when you're finishing a project like that, you don't even remember when you started. It feels like a lifetime ago. So the more you can do in prep, and then I kind of do weekly check-ins with my whole team. So on the Sunday night, I'll usually send an email and I'll be like, here's what we're doing this week. Here are some of the really interesting shots that we want to tackle. Here are some references for those shots. shots, because the last thing you want is to be figuring that stuff out on the day. Because like you said, if you get there and you're kind of explaining things to people, it's like the time is going to, in the amount of time that you have to explain the shot, you're like, you need to be shooting by now. So I do like a weekly check-in, just to kind of like realign with everybody. Another thing about being a cinematographer that I learned kind of like the higher I get is it's less about like picking a camera and lens package, and it's more about relationships with your heads of your departments. So if you're a cinematographer, you have a key grip and a gaffer and the director and a production designer. Maybe you have a showrunner that you got to deal with. And so kind of doing weekly check-ins with your heads of all your departments and saying like, how are you feeling right now? Like emotionally, how are you? Mentally, how are you? How do you feel about the project? Is there anything that we can do? And it's like, that's honestly like 51% of the job is like managing those relationships and checking with your people and making sure that, everyone else is still, operating at 100% or something close to it. Because on those long projects, you do get bogged down, and the only thing that prevents you from burnout is the collaboration that you get from other people and, bringing each other up. And that's something that I've learned is, so it's funny, like the new camera launches are so exciting and everything, but I feel like these days I'm more concerned with like, who are some new production designers that I want to work with? Because like that has more of an impact on the picture that I'm creating than what camera or lens I'm choosing at the end of the day.
Yeah, Cristoph and I have talked about this a lot. Like the camera is like probably the least important decision you're going to make. Like what camera you're shooting on is one of the least important decisions you're going to make. Everything else that goes in front of that camera, everyone who's behind that camera is so much more important than the sensor. And I think that like we can kind of I love gear. It's so cool. It's all great. I love it so much. I love it. But everything's good. Like every camera's great. You can prep it. It's done. It's built. If you're prepping a long format, you might have a lot more different things you need to prep, a lot more different setups, a lot of different builds you might need to have. But I agree with Cristoph. Like the most important thing is maintaining that vision and maintaining that team morale. And like I've found it very important over the past couple of years to just like revisit the basics. Like look at what you've shot, look at dailies, look at images, look at grabs, look at what you've done, and like remind yourself, read the script again. Like read it again, look at it and understand, right. That person's feeling this way. This is why I decided to do this, because you might have forgotten. And it's easy to fall into autopilot mode once you're moving on a long form project. And I think it's important to like keep it fresh in your mind, those basics, why you're here, and making sure your team's happy.
From my perspective, working with cinematographers too, something that I have learned as a director is you need to get on the same page emotionally, because we speak different languages. And the heads of every department have different ways they see the project and speak different languages about the exact same project. And so understanding, like as a director, I don't necessarily come from a technical background. I'll come from a more emotional space. The conversation I want to have with my cinematographer is about what I'm trying to achieve in that scene emotionally, where we have come from, where we are going, what I'm trying to evoke visually in the scene, and then how my cinematographer come to me, and then we collaborate together on what that looks like. And a huge part of that process is having references, like things to look at, because you can talk in languages in the same room and think you're on the same page, and then suddenly you're there on the day and you're like, what's this? This isn't what I wanted something. So I would say a really useful part of prep, besides like knowing your locations inside and out and picking them, is really being on the same page and understanding emotionally where you're at. So when you drop in on the day, it's just about executing something you already understand, and you have time. I, as a director, have now focused on helping my actors that's their time, getting to their performance. And so it's really difficult on the day for me to then have a conversation with my cinematographer, who then has to have a conversation with all of his team about how to execute it. So that's a really good, useful time in prep, is to really dig into the meat of the work. What are we doing and why? What are we trying to say here? And how can we make that beautiful? And how can we make that evocative and do that in prep? So that on the day, when it starts to unfold with our actors, or if the light is going or whatever, and you have to change your plan, you know what we're really trying to do, so you can problem solve together on that, and you're not trying to work through what it is we're doing in the first place.
And do it discreetly, because the last thing you want to do is let the actors see maybe the minor crisis that's happening. One of the things that I've learned a lot too on bigger projects with bigger and better actors is that acting is a really hard job actually, and to kind of get to that place where you're able to portray somebody else, especially if it's like a very heavy or emotional scene. If you have technicians kind of like running around like chickens with their heads cut off and like yelling at each other, it makes it really difficult for them to do their job. So being able to do that discreetly and not letting them kind of be privy to all of the chaos that film sets can be is super important as like a head of the department. And also protecting your director, because a lot of times, especially in TV series, the directors are coming in, every couple episodes or whatever, and so the crew kind of is like, oh, we have our way of doing things. Like, what does this director know? And as a DP, you're kind of like the middle person between the pack of animals that is the crew and the this poor director that's just like trying to do their job. So it's really important that you kind of like make sure that those like little fires that come up don't make it to the set anyways, or in front of the actors, because then they can't do their job, and then you can't make something, and then none of you have a job. So
All right, I'm gonna close things up, but I wanna say thank you to each of you so much for sharing your insight. I feel like we could talk an entire lifetime about narrative films and how to make a living in this space and ultimately create stories that people want to see and hear and watch, and that's why we all likely got into filmmaking, unless you are just doing it for the money, which probably not a good reason. But
Lucky.
Thank you, each of you. Let's give the
Thank
three
you
of them
so
a
much.
round of applause. Thank you guys.